what patterns did you notice around when the work of anti-racism gets overwhelming? Let's start there. Yeah.
I think I would say that's stuckness, right? Like it's where things like break down and stop, or focusing on what doesn't work, getting kind of like, oh, like here, let's problematize everything. Let's call out all the problems, but not put as much or more energy into where there are resources that we can actually tackle those things and tackle some of those um, pretty clear, obvious asks or needs that are like right in front of us that we could tackle.
Can
And
I
that,
ask you to dive into that piece around over problematizing, um, and how, and yeah, just a bit more context
mhm.
to that? Because I think it's a really important, because we're all guilty of it. We're thinkers
Yeah, 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 yeah,
in this
yeah.
work. And one of the principles is that you can't think your way out of racism. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, and I think I think it shows up in two ways. And I'm curious what Rob will say too, but like the personal, right? And so that's one piece, but and also with work. It's like I can point out all of the ways that maybe from my position, I'm a coordinator, I'm not at a senior level in my organization. So I don't have as an example, I don't have the power to make this or that change. But what do I, but I'm here and I am in relationship with lots of my colleagues. I have power in my location to affect change, right? And to focus on that versus focusing on what I don't have control over or what's outside of my locus of control. So I think like on a work front, if when we were discussing, we could identify a lot of problems a lot easier than we could identify solutions, maybe is a way that that shows up. And then that how that it can start either one of two ways. It can start with intellectualizing the problems, and then that leads to feelings of overwhelm,
mhm.
feelings of feeling defeated, or like, oh well, this is like where should I even bother? How should I even start? This is too big. So like what can I do? And recognizing that sooner, and not letting shame be the thing that shuts that down and keep movement from happening, because I think that's usually how that cycle goes. You feel there's feelings of overwhelm and like I can't do anything about this. I'm powerless in this situation, or it's too hard to hold the feelings. And so then shame comes in to protect us from our feelings, and there's no movement there. So I think the more that we can just recognize and have a bit more compassion, um, that that's what happens, with the intention of getting unstuck faster and keeping the work going, not having compassion and then just like coddling ourselves into feeling better and then not doing anything.
I think that's a great description of the stuckness. And then what I appreciated that you were bringing, Danielle, was that one escape route was to say, yes, but what is it we have that we can tackle together?
Yeah.
And I think that's like recentering agency in the group. So we've wandered off into figuring out that the world is a scary place and we've got all these systems that are not aligned with our what we're trying to achieve, but we can't affect them directly. But we do have these relationships, and we have relationships within our work, and we can act on those, right? So it's just bringing it back to that and helping people see that. The other thing, the other escape or way out of the loop for me is actually about the relationships themselves. And that, like for me anyway, when I get overwhelmed, I tend to feel very isolated and alone. And it's almost like the overwhelm turns into me feeling like I have to solve this myself. It's my problem, and I've got to go away. I've got to check out and work it out. And when I'm perfect or I have it all right, I'll be back. And it's sort of like there's nothing helpful about that process. And just realizing, for me anyway, that wait a minute, we're all in this, and I'm not alone, and it's not something I'm going to solve by myself anyway. It's about our relationships, and I need everyone in this space. And it's not something, a group of white people are going to solve by themselves either. We need our amazing workplaces where we have the diversity we have. That's what's so powerful about this work is we
Mhm.
have in terms of agency and relationships across difference, we have amazing places to be in and to
Right.
work.
And the
Yeah.
wisdom is in the space. So it's noticing when
Yeah.
that confrontation of self comes up. And I think you both spoke um, beautifully to those challenges. And I think, while we can have this conversation right now with ease, the reality is that um, harm is caused, right?
Yes.
When these behaviors are unchecked, right? Violence ensues. The very commitments that we make and declarations that we make within the charter or within your organizational equity plans fall short because of the people, right? And I think what's so important about this conversation is that we really know that when it comes to advancing decent work from an organizational perspective and equity and thinking about the roots of how we can be accountable around truth and reconciliation, it does require us to examine our behaviors and not lean into just the processes, but the ecosystems, I guess, within ourselves. Because we all come with our own learned behavior, right? And so being anti-racist or wanting to advance this work in the workplace cannot be, the truth is and maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot for saying this, but it's true. You can't just fragment it in your workplace. It is a commitment that has to be across the board in your life. And I think um, that's an important piece that cannot get lost around the behaviors is that it's not that you walk out the door and you no longer care about, you know, advancing equity or being anti-oppressive. It,
Mm-hmm.
it, it does have to become a practice in all elements of your life.
Yeah,
Um,
that
yeah,
speaks to
no, go ahead.
the commitment piece. That's very much part of the principles. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
And I would love to know in terms of this process that we engage with around engaging white folks across the nonprofit sector to hold them accountable and say, how are you going to talk to your other peers around, equity? How are you going to hold each other accountable? I'm curious, what are some key factors kind of bringing us to the third point around sustainability and how folks can engage in those practices, particularly white folks who are like you said, Rob, at the beginning, they were keen, or Danielle,
Mm-hmm.
you're like they were
Mm-hmm.
keen, they wanted to it. But at the end of our third session, we could see that fizzle come out because it was like, wow, we're overwhelmed. This is a huge undertaking. And we get stuck on wordsmithing, we get stuck on feeling like we don't have power. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about that kind of third theme around sustainability. And yeah.
I think one of the most important things, and it segues from the last piece about getting stuck, is really refocusing on what's available. Like, where is there movement? And that's the thing I usually ask myself if I'm feeling really overwhelmed or feeling really stuck, is like, what is possible or what is available right now to keep this moving? And it's being okay with the answer that's maybe the hardest part, because it might not meet anywhere near your expectation, but at least in the beginning, but it won't get anywhere near that if you don't start moving again. So you need to really accept and start where you are and start and accept where other people are. um, and find a way to be okay with that, or to be able to move into that, because it doesn't always take that long once you actually start moving again. It feels like it going from stuck to those first couple steps is the hardest, but then there's momentum again, and then things can start to build and grow legs or whatever, right? So I think that's a big piece, is like what's little and tangible and possible to just keep moving forward. And so, yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and I would add, I mean, for us, with Toronto Neighborhood Centers, we've found some success in contributing as a network, and that, from a sector point of view, it's probably not going to work if we just leave this work up to individual organizations, because it's going to take more spaces and invitations and reminders and inspiration to move this forward than just relying on some extraordinary organization. So I think there's work for TNC and for ONN to do in terms of sort of profiling these principles, but then the ongoing support. I mean, we're just going to need to support the white folks that are stepping into this space and support them to invite others into the space. We're going to have fun along the way so people are attracted to this space and it doesn't feel only like a burden. It's very as you said, Yami, it's about finding a way to live better together.
A lot of amazing things came out of this conversation. And I guess just to close this out, I'd like to ask you, and you can take a moment to answer this question. What are three key takeaways that you want to invite folks to think about as they're doing this work around anti-racism within their nonprofits, especially recognizing that the context for folks are so different. Some folks are in, Toronto, some folks are in rural and northern spaces. So three key takeaways. And maybe you could do them together. Yeah, do them together.
The first thing that comes to mind is to think of that I hope, when people are engaging with the principles, that they think of it as a living document, not as something static or tools to just slap on to what they're doing, but to do it together and to puzzle it out together and to keep making them their own and to keep making those principles alive within their work and within the way that they move in their lives and in their work, and to have those conversations with one another and to keep trying to find ways to do that in community as much as possible. Mm-hmm. Is the first thing that comes to mind.
And I guess for me, as you mentioned at one point, Yami, that the stakes are very high in not doing this work in terms of the continued harms and very real impacts in people's lives. So I think it's important to remember that, but also bring compassion to one another in trying to do this work. And we want to try to proceed with care so that we're not making things worse if we can understand how we would do that. But there's got to be some bravery to just really screw things up and make mistakes and learn with each other. Otherwise, we're just the kind of tentativeness is not gonna be enough to break us out of these patterns.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're ready. You're ready right where you are to pick it up from where you are.
And we have to support each other. I mean, I think our goal is just to support each other to take this on and keep going. And find ways, imagine ways and structures. And it's not one size fits all. There's going to be a whole bunch of possibilities, but that's the work. That's the work. That's the work underneath all of your supposed work that's listed in your job description.
Yeah.
And take risks to engage people in conversations about what's really inspiring you from the pathways or from the where you want to get started, and because you're going to find your people, you're going to find the right connections and your people to work on this with, if you put yourself out there and start having those conversations.
Yeah. Doing the work is messy. It is messy and it holds a lot of contradictions at times because we still do operate within the system of the nonprofit sector. And so that has its own tensions and realities. And I think I appreciate you both so much for engaging in this process with me, and for us, being in dialogue around how to hold folks accountable and speaking truth to power on that front. So thank you both so much. And if folks wanted to learn more about the community of practice around dismantling white supremacy, which name may change, how do they go about doing that? And I know that we're exploring different potential options around what it could look like as a province wide. But yeah, just if folks wanted to get um, connected.
So from the TNC end of things, I don't know where we'll go with the ONN, but there will be resources on the websites on the Toronto neighbor, so it's neighborhoodcenters.ca, but the ONN will have stuff there as
Yeah,
a jumping point.
yeah,
Um, and anybody can connect to Danielle and myself through the TNC. I think my email and Sri's email are on the website, but that will find us.
great,
Um, yeah, yeah.
amazing,
And we're happy to share anything else that we can about this work.
Yeah,
amazing.
absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you, Yami, for this chance.
Yeah.
And thanks, Danielle.
Of course, thanks,
Thank you
y'all.
for inviting us into this work with you.
Thank you for doing the work. Lord, I put y'all to work, and I appreciate you.